All the mums and dads went, oh, that lovely Cliff Ridgey.
Living Doll was Cliff's first #1 hit and marked the beginning of the end for Cliff, the edgy rock and roller.
He suddenly went soft because Living Doll was originally a rock and roll song. I got myself crying, walking, sleeping, talking, and it was frenetic, and it was Bruce Welch that said, oh, but it was slow it down. Dun janga dunga jang, dun janga dunga jang.
Got the one and only walking, talking, Living Doll.
I think there was a lot of pressure put on him to become an all-round entertainer, lose the group and stand in front of an orchestra and do it like it had been done in the 40s and 50s.
But Cliff was a true pioneer, with no blueprint to hand for what a rock and roller might do next. Still in its infancy, rock had yet to establish a circuit of its own.
When you had your rock and roll star, you didn't really know where to send him out to work. So what you did is you booked him on musicals. So he would appear perhaps second on the bill after a conjurer and before a comedian. And Cliff was the one more than anyone who fell for this. I mean, one minute he was representing sort of the revolution of the new teenager, and the next minute he was performing in all these musical theatres and learning his trade and being told balance would be better and would sell more records.
If you want to find Cliff himself for the next few months, he'll be here with fan mail, appearing twice nightly.
I think he was advised, as any good manager or agent would advise a client, you know, if you want to keep earning money, you've got to change.
I wanted to further him as a solo person because I didn't want him to live and die, which was very possible, you know, just leading a rock and roll band.
But Cliff's father, Roger, continued to exert his own influence over his son's runaway success.
He didn't want to be his manager, but he wanted to be his manager, if you know what I'm trying to say. And maybe it was just paternal protectiveness. It may have been that, you know, I don't know, but he began to delve into things and he came up with weird situations. He wanted to put his spoke in.
Cliff's father eventually dismissed Tito and appointed his successor, but he couldn't replace himself. Roger Webb died in May 1961, and Britain's most successful pop star and national heartthrob became head of the family overnight. Suddenly more in charge of his own destiny, and with a major tour of Australia looming, Cliff slipped into sacrificial mode.
When his father died, I didn't hear anything for a long time. And then, of course, the pressure was on him to go to Australia, so he got to leave, I suppose, his mother and sisters and go off to Australia. And I think that's when the pressure started, and that's when he wrote the letter. Delia, I want you to understand the position I am in, being a pop singer. I'm going to have to give up many things in my life, but being a pop singer, I have to give up the most priceless thing. That is the long-lasting relationship with a special girl. I couldn't give up my career, and besides, the fact that my mother and sisters, since my father's death, rely on me completely. I have show business in my blood now, and I would be lost without it. Dee, all I can say now, goodbye, and don't think too badly of me. Love, Cliff.
Like Elvis before him, Cliff was now transformed into a big screen phenomenon. Over the next 3 years, he made 3 hugely successful movies: The Young Ones, Wonderful Life, and Summer Holiday.
We're all going on a summer holiday. No more working for a week or two. Fun and laughter on a summer holiday. No more worries for me or you. For a week or two. We're going where the sun.
Cliff was now an idealized, non-threatening matinee idol. But more than ever, he felt the need for guidance. With the loss of his father, Cliff began looking for someone or something. It was during the filming of Wonderful Life that he instigated prayer meetings on the beach.
Doing things they always
He looked around one day, the old story, isn't it? I've got everything, and yet, you know, I'm still looking for something. And he looked in lots of different directions, Jehovah's Witnesses, this, that, and the next thing. He met up with someone, Bill Latham, started asking questions, endless questions. David Winter, who ended up being the head of religious broadcasting at the BBC, spent hours and hours and hours answering the questions. I mean, he reckons Cliff asked more questions than anybody else he'd ever known trying to become a Christian.
How do you hear his voice? Christ, I mean. Is it like ringing him up when you fancy a chat?
It was a terrifying experience, I can tell you. I mean, he's not an intellectual, but my goodness, he is bright.
Jesus Christ, an ordinary bloke who died centuries ago, and you like go on about him as if he was Harold Wilson or something.
I was in the dock, and Christianity was under trial. I mean, that's basically what it was.
Well, I suppose he was clever. He made his name saying a few smart things like, turn the other cheek.
I think Cliff was always liable to faith. He wanted a belief, so he was susceptible to it. Again, because of the parental background and because of the culture of India. Everyone has a faith in India, and some people have several faiths.
It was in 1966 that Cliff finally went public with his newly found faith, during one of American evangelist Billy Graham's many British crusades.
It was very rare to be a Christian in show business in the 60s. In fact, Cliff, I think, broke the mould by being the one that stood up in front of thousands of people to actually stand up and say, I'm a Christian.
I must say that before I became a Christian, I asked many, many questions and hoped really deep down that maybe I wouldn't get the right answer so that I could just call the whole thing off and have a great time.
I think in 1967, to declare it, it was just the most unfashionable, the most daring, courageous, brave act that you could imagine. You could have said that you believed that the world was flat and people would have had more time for you.
I, as a Christian, want desperately to tell as many people that will listen that I am a Christian and that Jesus Christ is a living personage and that he belongs to us if only we'll have him. And I would never have had this opportunity to confess him with my lips if I had not been Cliff Richard.
I thought it was strange. I thought, gosh, what's happened to Cliff? It didn't seem to be the Cliff that I knew.
He looked like a bank manager by then. He had the, the horn-rimmed glasses and the suit and tie, and professing to be a rock and roll star, and he didn't look like a rock and roll star.
Friend we have in Jesus, all our sins and grief to bear.
It was so totally real and therefore powerful.
Everything to God.
At that time, I was an agnostic. Later on in my life, I realised that agnosticism was just a cop-out. I was really an atheist. And later on, I realised I wasn't even an atheist. I'm an anti-theist. I'm prepared to be quite vehemently preach against people who have religion. So quite frankly, I think to go around spreading religion is as bad as taking drugs.
Everything to God and pray.
It was actually probably quite a defining moment for him because he just got up and said a few things and sang a song. But it was sort of very, very public. And from then on, he was Cliff the Christian.
So lays there.